Доброе утро. Меня зовут Doug Lawrence. I do speak a bit of Russian, not as much as I would like. Maybe I should work harder at that. I've been to Translation Forum Russia several times and enjoyed it every time, and missed the times I don't go. In the translation industry, I've been involved in selling and the sales process within translation for a very long time, mainly in software localization, but in some translation as well. And I find that my passion is making sure that our customers use translation properly, they understand what we do, and they understand the value of what we bring to the process and the quality that we bring to the process. I also am a believer that we don't always represent ourselves particularly well because we focus on internal issues. And sometimes I believe we should focus on issues that are important to the client, which sometimes are difficult to understand anyway. I work in ISO, in the International Standards Organization, in SC3, in TC37. Most of you know about TC37 because you know about the International Standard 17100. I work more on the sort of semi-technical side on things like TBX, the term-based exchange format and so on. So I'm more dealing with terminology, which I really love. Again, I think people don't do enough terminology. So I also do things like teaching at universities to students, mainly on MA in translation, and I teach the business side of that. So I'm looking at getting them ready for doing things like invoices and chasing money and presenting themselves and marketing, etc. So not just the technical side, because I'm not a translator and I'm not an interpreter. So hopefully that gives you enough about me. And I'm a granddude, which is like a grandfather. So that's a very nice thing to be as well.
Nice to see you, Doug. Could you please tell us, what did you learn during the lockdown?
So there were a number of things I learned, and I think first of all that the world changed a lot, as we know, on initial view, and then you look around and you think, did it change that much? And maybe it did, but I think we have to look at the opportunities that are presented by that. So there are people who make alcohol now who are not to drink, but to wash our hands, and they're making a lot of money. And so I think that we have to understand, how did our markets change and how did people change, and what can we do to help our customers grow and overcome this. I learned about being a grandfather, which was great. I personally learned, I took a lot of courses. So I took courses in law, because I'm studying a lot of law, because I do a lot of contracts. That's in American law and British law. I also spent some time looking at, I want to talk to you about what I call epiphanies, when something happens in your life and you go, oh. So I was in a group meeting, we were talking about one of the companies we're running, and what we do is we want to sell internationally. And I said, oh, we could translate the website. And everybody looked at me and said, are you crazy? We're just going to use influencers. And this is part of what I want to talk about during my presentation, that if you use social media internationally, do you need then to look at how you work with your website? So how much do we translate? Those of you who are written translators probably realize things like manuals, etc., are getting smaller every year. The amount that's written on a website is getting smaller every year. So if a company wants to promote themselves internationally, are they going to write a huge website, or are they going to work with, if they're in the consumer side, influencers, or if they're in the business side, are they going to work with things like LinkedIn instead? So that's what I want to talk about to a certain extent on Friday, and what opportunities there are for people to get involved in that type of business and to help their clients deliver those type of services. So I particularly took the Facebook Blueprint exam, and that's something I want to talk about during TFR as well. And I learned a lot of other things as well, because it was a great time for perhaps taking stock and pausing a little bit.
For instance, which spheres did you take that time?
So I said mainly law, a lot of DIY. I don't know if that translates the same in Russian, but my daughter lives in the United States, and I had to learn how to fix a lot of things electrical. I had to learn how to handle scorpions, to learn how to do air conditioning, which you don't really have in the United Kingdom because of the weather. So a lot of DIY, which is on my TikTok, because I learned TikTok as well. So there was a lot of things that I did that I wouldn't have otherwise had time to do. And I guess the other thing I learned, and there are lots of countries where we say this, but if you're healthy, you're happy. And so I was grateful. And a lot of people have been affected by COVID a lot worse than I have. So, you know, I'm very grateful for that. So I think I learned that when we talk about success later, that part of success, maybe you start with gratitude and understand that where you are and what's good and what you should be thankful for.
Oh, I see. Doug, could you please name 3 features of a successful interpreter?
Yeah, so as most of you who know me know, I'm not a linguist, and so I can't really talk about the technical achievements of being a successful interpreter. But I think what I would say is that we can define it for the same thing in terms of the interpreter or the written translator, that whatever success is something you decide. And I know that sounds crazy, but often what we often say is things like, I want to earn X amount of money, I want to take more time off. But I would say sometimes those are negative definitions. So yes, well, what are you going to do with this money? It might be travel. So, you know, a lot of interpreters love travel as part of their job. So I would say, first of all, define what you mean by success, and then prioritize goals that will reach that. I met a gentleman once on an airplane, and I was sitting next to him, and unusually for an English person, I made conversation with him. We don't usually do that in English. As you know, the British people were a bit more reserved. And I asked him what he did for a job, and he said, I'm in the rag trade. And the rag trade is like kind of slang for fashion or clothing. And I said, oh, how long have you been in that? And he said, 27 years. I said, wow, that's fantastic. And he said, no, it's not so fantastic. I hate it. I said, why are you in it? So we have to think, what is it we want to be successful about? And yes, it could be more money, but actually what it means is probably, maybe it's more holiday, maybe it's visiting the sea, maybe it's recognition, maybe you want to be the best translator in your field or the best interpreter, maybe you want to find some satisfaction with status. So I would say you define your success. What I would say is avoid the should word. I was with a conference in Las Vegas in America, and the lady who ran a translation company came up to me, and she was really upset about things because she'd been to the conference and she'd heard all these wonderful things about what people should do and what they should be doing and implementing technology and doing this and doing that. And she said to me, I feel really bad because I don't do these things. And I said, how long have you run your business for? And she said, about 12 years. I said, how many people do you employ? She said, around about 10 people. I know that seems strange saying around about, but, and I said, and is business okay? She said, yeah, I get a good living from it. And I said, well, who are these people that tell you should do things? That sounds like success to me. That sounds like you're happy, you're facing problems, but you're happy. So she felt an external stress on what success should be. So I would say try and ignore other people's shoulds and find out your success. And then the difficult thing, I think, sometimes is prioritizing those actions that will achieve your success. So if you really want to earn more money, and I said that's like a negative success, but what are you doing to earn more money? Are you turning away work that's less well priced for work that's higher priced? Are you searching for work that's higher priced, or are you presenting yourself as higher priced? Are you, and this is difficulty for anybody that's involved in production. If you're an interpreter or a written translator, then you're doing work. How do you then switch your brain to work to promoting yourself? And you will see a lot of people who are quite successful in social media and that they're good at Instagram and they're good at LinkedIn, etc. Sometimes I wonder if those people would have been good at that sort of thing anyway, and they just happen to be an interpreter or a translator or a consultant. So what I'm saying is that I think drive is important. People I meet who are successful, and by that I mean like people who are successful in the normal way we measure success, material success, very rich, etc. They have personal problems sometimes, just like poor people have personal problems, but they do have drive as well. They have a drive to sacrifice things and to do other things, so that they will take less time off. They will get up earlier in the morning. They will not do things so they can build other things. And I don't have that drive as much as them at all. And so I have to understand what my success is. And so far, I'm a grandfather, so I'm happy with that. That's a big success for me. And then I would say you've got to appreciate what you've got. So if you say I want to work fewer hours, or I want to do this type of work, I want to only work in agriculture or in fisheries, and you start getting more of that work, then appreciate what you've got and take time to pause. And okay, the lockdown and COVID has helped people do that, but take time to pause and to understand what it is you really like about your life. And then maybe you slightly move your goals because you realize that what you've got is great. And so don't just keep going towards a goal, be prepared to change. Sorry for the very long answer.
Obviously. And of course, if we are talking about success, there is no difference if you are doing some written translation or interpretation. Yeah, it's just about finding your path.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way of describing it. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Thank you. And how do you see a kind of perfect translation company?
So it's interesting that I have debates with people involved in marketing and strategy, because I always say, coming from the type of, we had the Thatcherism in the 80s in the United Kingdom, and Margaret Thatcher was well known across the world, and she's very focused on business, on lower taxes, on home ownership, these sort of things. And so I was brought up in the era where you said a company is created for the shareholders. And that means that if the company does what the shareholders, the people who own the company, want, the company is a success. And people tell me that's empty, that the company has to have a reason. So it has to be that it wants to make the best printer for computers. It wants to make the best cups. It wants to make the best mugs from Sochi, for instance. You know,
Nice.
I don't really believe that as much. So I would say we can broaden it, not just the owners of the company, but maybe what we call the stakeholders. The stakeholders might be the workers in the company, the owners of the company, the managers of the company, the customers of the company. So I think an ideal translation company delivers something that makes their stakeholders' lives better. And so often translation companies, when I talk to them, if I say, what's your USP? They'll say things like our translation quality or the quality of our translators. And I don't always agree with that, because I think sometimes what they're doing is processing files. They're making their customer look good, or they're taking away worries from their customers. So find out what your stakeholders want and deliver upon that.
Okay, that's nice. Quite a great answer, I could say. Doug, could you make kind of a prospect what would happen to the translation field in 100 years?
This is an interesting question, because I won't be here in 100 years. And I don't know if any of you know that yesterday, for example, was 100 years of the 19th Amendment in the USA, which gave women the vote. And if you look around, that's 100 years since women had the vote in the West. And it's universal suffrage is something we now all believe in, I hope. I don't think anybody wants to take the vote away from women, but it took a long time for women to get the vote. So when I look at 100 years, I start thinking about it in a social context rather than perhaps in a technological context. And the social side almost is perhaps more difficult to understand. If it took 100, if women only got the vote 100 years ago, what does that mean about and actually, some of you who studied history know that women had power before them, but with modernization and things, it was taken away from them. So I think that life will get better for more people, and that means on average people will be wealthier. It means on average people will be healthier. I think sometimes we obsess about the politics of the day and we don't look at the long term. So I've included in my links a book called Factfulness, written by Hans Rosling and his son and his daughter-in-law, because he died before the book was published. But he talks about how life is not as bad as you think. You know, life is getting better. So I think life will get better. I think in the translation field, we have that. A lot of people are talking about the bifurcation, the splitting in two sides of people involved in post-editing machine translation and people involved in high quality, I don't want to use the word quality, high value work. And the way I've described it in the slides is that I think one is about less touch in a sense, and the other is about more touch. So how much time do you spend? If you're interpreting, if you're in front of somebody, you're spending time with them. And so therefore you need to be paid more than if you're doing something that you spend less time on. That's true to a certain extent, but we also have to understand value, what value you're delivering in that time available. So I think certainly the technology to me seems obvious. Technology will increase, but even that, if you take cars, for example, that still run on gasoline or petrol, as we call it in the United Kingdom, and of course, Russia has a relationship with oil. It has a lot of oil. It also has a lot of very poor gasoline or petroleum. So when people travel in Russia, they have to be careful sometimes of what they put into the tank of their car. Well, cars have been around for more than 100 years, so why are we still having problems with them? I think with technology, yes, machine translation gets better, translation memory gets better. I think the ability for us to translate difficult things gets easier, so file formats become a bit easier each time. I think anybody involved in translation ought to be involved in technology, but I come from a technology side. So I'm not sure I'll be here for 100 years. I think President Putin may be, so maybe he would know better than me. But I would say they'll still want humans, and they'll still want people to do good things. And linguists are more important than just the work they do. They contribute towards society. They help companies understand each other better. So I wouldn't want us to give up just because we think we're going to be replaced by a little handheld device, because there's something else we deliver that's more important than just the work itself.
No, I see. So talking about the work of people and the work of machines, people would never be replaced, just 100%.
Or they'll be doing something different. So we can see definitely that people have been replaced in a lot of areas, and we all benefit from technology, even as simple as translation memory. So I think it's that we deliver something else, and we have to be aware of that we do more than just the work of translation or interpreting. We do other things as well. So we will do different things in 100 years.
Okay. Imagine that you're the president of all the interpreters. Which decree would be issued first?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. It's about time I was president of all interpreters. It's been a long time coming, and I've worked very hard for this, and I have to say I deserve it. But I think it's important we have stability, because if you keep electing presidents every 4 years, I mean, that's just crazy. So first thing is you should elect me president for life. I think that's obvious to everybody. And once I've done that, maybe I'll say that as I'm president for life, there's now me and everybody else should cooperate, contribute, whatever we call that, share. One of the things that's really nice about the translation industry is that when we work with others, we learn and we share, and we're not as much in competition as other fields I've seen. There is more work to go around. Translation keeps growing despite all the technology around it. So I would say, and that's part of what I think Translation Forum Russia is about, is that when we share and we contribute, we learn more, and there is more for us to enjoy and to learn and to succeed with. Thank you.
Could you please tell us an amusing or unusual story from your working experience?
So I have two stories to tell you. One is when some very nice friends of mine in Tomsk took me to the airport in Novosibirsk, and I had to stay in a hotel, and we arrived very early in the morning, like 4 a.m. or something. And some of you know I'm vegetarian. I don't eat meat. I don't eat chicken either, which has got that strange thing in Russian about chicken not being meat. Well, it's ask the chicken.
What about fish?
No, I don't eat fish either. No riba. So I wanted omelette with cheese, and my Russian isn't great, so I wanted omelette с сыром. This is what I wanted. I wanted an omelette with cheese, and I tried explaining this because I was practicing my Russian, and the person at 4 a.m. in the morning, so I can understand, it just said, "You're not having omelette with cheese. You can have cheese, and you can have an omelette. They'll be on the plate together, but they won't be inside. You know, the cheese won't be inside the omelette." And I said, "Come on, this is not difficult. I know it's early, but just get." So I tried talking about this. Then my friend from Palex said, "Stop, Doug," and he explained it in Russian, and they talked a bit, and they talked a bit. Then he turned around to me and he said, "You're going to get an omelette with the cheese inside." And I said, "I don't understand it. What changed?" And he said, "This is Russia. You just need to ask the question differently." So interpreting, like I say, is not just about asking the question. Sometimes it's about the way you ask the question and how you ask the question, and when you understand the cultural areas around it. And my second one is a bit less funny and a bit more serious, but still quite surprising. I was talking to a client, and they were I used to be a government advisor for the United Kingdom, where I would go in and talk to people who are exporting. And what I do is try and help them understand how to better translate their website and their social media, etc. And this customer was talking away and he said, oh, I can't use interpreters. I went to China and the interpreter didn't know anything. They didn't understand all our words. And I said, what do you mean you didn't understand all our words? He said, they didn't understand what a pump vector blah, blah, blah was. And I said, well, I'm a British speaker, native, and I'm pretty good at English. I'm sorry I speak too quickly. I do know that. I know I should be Madeleine. But I just said, well, I don't understand all your terminology. He said, yeah, but you're not an interpreter, are you? I said, no. I said, but an interpreter can't understand all terminology. Did you prepare a list for them of terms? Now, that's kind of a silly question because you know they're not going to. But he said, no, of course not. I said, well, if you list your terms, things that not normal English people would understand, then even if you just explain it in English, then you can give that to interpreters. You can take it to trade shows to explain to people. And then you won't have that that challenge, because even people who can speak English don't necessarily understand terms specific to your company or your industry. And sometimes your customers at trade shows might speak English, but they won't understand your exact terminology. So it was a surprise to me that somebody would criticize the interpreter, but it's also a reminder that sometimes we have to try and help our clients. I'm not a fan of the word educate. We have to help our clients understand the benefits of working with interpreters and working with professionals and helping them to understand what it is they're trying to achieve. And in doing that, the customers will help themselves and help them gain more customers as well.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for that great amusing stories that you presented, and also for the interview. It was nice to speak to you. So we'll meet during the conference.
Да, спасибо большое. До свидания.